The story begins with a loud explosion as a massive rock shatters under the scorching sun where several prisoners were breaking stones. Among them was a man named John Rambo. Suddenly, the guards told him to stop working because someone had come to see him. Years ago, Rambo was part of the Special Forces. Now, he put down his axe and walked with a guard to the gate, where he saw a familiar face, Colonel Troutman. Rambo had fought alongside Troutman in the Vietnam War, but later surrendered to the police to avoid a death sentence. Since then, Troutman had been trying to get his skilled soldier out of prison. He asked the guard for privacy and then told Rambo that the government needed his help again. American soldiers were still being held captive in Vietnam at the very camp Rambo had once escaped from. No one knew the surrounding jungle better than him. Troutman believed only Rambo could complete this mission: go into enemy territory and find out how many soldiers were still alive. Rambo didn't respond at first. He had lost all trust in the government and didn't want to return to the place where he had suffered so much. But staying in prison meant 5 more years of hard labor. Troutman knew what Rambo needed to hear. He promised that if Rambo returned alive, he would be reinstated into the army on the president's order. With no real purpose left in life, no friends, no family, Rambo agreed. Maybe saving innocent soldiers trapped deep in the enemy jungle could give his life some meaning. Colonel Troutman then explained the full plan to Rambo. First, he would parachute into enemy territory. This time, he would be given more tools and weapons than before, and the colonel advised him to use them wisely as he was going on this mission alone. Rambo was shown the operations command center, filled with advanced machines to track his every move. In Vietnam, a local contact named Commando would assist him. Murdoch assured him everything would go smoothly, but Rambo wasn't convinced. He remarked that there was no such thing as safety in Vietnam, which made Murdoch nervous, prompting him to speak with Troutman. Troutman reassured him that Rambo was the bravest soldier of the Vietnam War, capable of taking on an entire army single-handedly and willing to risk his life if needed. Before heading out, Rambo prepared his signature knife, loaded his rifle, strapped on his gear, and got ready. Troutman wished him luck. He had 36 hours to complete the mission and return to the extraction point. Before leaving, Rambo told Troutman that Murdoch had lied about serving in Vietnam. His unit was stationed elsewhere. Still, he said he trusted Troutman and wouldn't follow anyone else's orders. Soon, Erickson flew Rambo out while Murdoch and Troutman watched. Murdoch privately admitted their real aim wasn't rescuing the soldiers. It was just to calm the public by pretending action was being taken. Meanwhile, Rambo had already jumped into darkness, but his parachute got stuck, leaving him hanging from the plane. Despite Murdoch's order to abort the mission, Rambo cut himself free with his knife, sending his heavy gear crashing into the jungle before opening his chute and disappearing into the night. Murdoch wanted him brought back, but Troutman insisted they wait at the extraction point. On the ground, Rambo had few weapons but strong resolve. Armed with knives and a bow, he navigated the deadly jungle until he reached a temple, where he spotted someone in a Vietnamese hat. Approaching cautiously, he grabbed the person, only to find it was Commando, his mission partner. She took him to the river and explained the POW camp had been empty for a while, but they still had a plan. They reached a pirate base to avoid enemy patrols and paid the pirates for passage. Rambo asked how they avoided military guards, and sure, the pirate leader proudly showed a Russian rocket launcher. Along the way, Commando asked why Rambo returned. He said that after coming home, he realized his war wasn't over. Life in America had been difficult, but during war, he felt alive. Commando revealed she joined the intelligence team after her father's death, but was now tired of seeing death and dreamed of a peaceful life in America. She touched her lucky necklace, and Rambo showed her his knife, saying it was his lucky charm. No one could kill him as long as he had it. Meanwhile, Troutman wanted to send a team to the extraction point, believing Rambo would return. But Murdoch didn't care about his life. Eventually, Troutman's persistence won out. Back in Vietnam, Rambo and Commando reached the enemy camp at night. As they advanced, they saw a woman sent to entertain the guards. Rambo, ready with his bow, ignored Commando's warning that his job was only to take pictures. He silently cut through fences and snuck into the shadows. The camp seemed empty, so he pressed forward until he heard cries of pain. Peeking inside a filthy building, he saw American soldiers, weak and starving. Rats roamed the room. Outside, he found a soldier named Banks tied to a tree and quickly freed him. As they sneaked away, a Vietnamese guard appeared. Rambo stabbed him instantly. Another turned on a flashlight, and Rambo killed him with an arrow. When another guard spotted Commando, Rambo saved her just in time. Now with Commando and Banks, Rambo escaped the camp, but was determined to return and save the others. By morning, Vietnamese soldiers discovered the bodies and launched a search. Banks, too weak to go on, stayed behind and told Rambo he'd arrived just in time. Prisoners were constantly moved and forced into hard labor. When Rambo told him the war had ended 10 years ago, Banks was stunned. He hadn't even realized how long he'd been imprisoned. Time had passed, and the three of them quickly reached the riverbank and boarded the pirates' boat. They had to reach the extraction point, which was about 2 kilometers away. Meanwhile, Troutman and Erickson had also set out to meet them. However, the Vietnamese soldiers soon got wind of their escape and sent a boat to intercept them. As soon as the pirates saw the approaching military boat, they betrayed Rambo and his companions. They confiscated Rambo's weapons, planning to hand them over to the authorities in exchange for a reward. But Rambo wasn't an amateur. He used a hidden knife in his pants to kill one of the pirates, took his gun, and swiftly eliminated the rest. When the Vietnamese soldiers opened fire, he instructed his companions to jump into the water. The bullets nearly killed Rambo, but he survived by ducking behind the deck. Then he pulled out the pirates' Russian rocket launcher and blew up the enemy boat in one shot. Even though the boat was on fire, it still sped toward them. At the last second, one surviving pirate tried to strangle Rambo with a rope, but Rambo cut it with his knife and jumped into the water just 2 seconds before the collision. Eventually, he reached the shore where his teammates were waiting. They began moving through the jungle toward the extraction point. Along the way, Rambo bid farewell to Commando. She tried to stop him from going back, but just then, Vietnamese troops spotted them and opened heavy fire. Despite the attack, Rambo managed to carry Banks to safety. At that moment, Erickson and Troutman spotted them from their helicopter. Rambo signaled to them while advancing with Banks. Back at the command center, Murdoch was informed that Rambo had rescued a live American prisoner, which left him speechless. In a panic, he cleared the room and ordered Erickson via phone to abort the mission and return to base. Though Troutman objected, Murdoch's men pointed guns at him, forcing them to retreat, leaving Rambo and Banks behind. On the ground, Rambo was surrounded by enemies. When he saw the helicopter turn away, he was devastated. With no weapons left, he and Banks were quickly captured. Kobau witnessed it all while hiding in the Yushu jungle. When Troutman returned to base, he furiously accused Murdoch of betrayal. Murdoch admitted the mission was a sham from the start. The government had no intention of bringing prisoners back. They just wanted to pacify the public. Dutish expected Rambo to return empty-handed. Since he defied orders, he was now suffering the consequences. Troutman knew the truth. It was all about money. The US refused to compensate for wartime damages, so the Vietnamese kept American soldiers captive. Murdoch tried to rationalize, saying that if Vietnam got the money, they could ally with enemies of the US and pose a threat. And if footage of the prisoner's condition reached the media, it could reignite conflict. Troutman refused to accept this logic, cursed Murdoch, and left. Murdoch warned him to stay out of it, or he'd make a grave mistake. But Troutman replied, "The biggest mistake you already made, and that mistake is Rambo." Meanwhile, Rambo was being tortured, submerged in a filthy drain with bugs crawling on his body and his arms shackled in iron chains. Banks and other captives were locked in cages. Soon, a Soviet helicopter arrived carrying Lieutenant Colonel Podovsky. He ordered Rambo to be pulled from the drain for interrogation. Despite all the pain, Rambo remained silent. Then Podovsky summoned Sergeant Yushin, who placed Rambo's signature knife into burning coal, preparing for the next round of torture. का नाटक करते हुए Rambo को Podovsky ordered his officers to send a warning that if America tried to spy again, it wouldn't end well for them. But Rambo fearlessly refused. In response, Yush began electrocuting him to force a confession. But Rambo didn't utter a single word. Podovsky then read out American intelligence messages which said, "Dragonfly, Wolf dead." And Rambo realized that Murdoch had aborted the mission and left him to die. Despite further electric shocks, Rambo stayed silent. Meanwhile, Kobau, disguised as an entertainer to distract the guards, infiltrated the camp. She was taken to a hut where she killed a soldier and stole his weapons. Back in the interrogation room, Podovsky brought in Banks to pressure Rambo. Yush then used a red-hot knife to cut Rambo's face and threatened Banks by holding the knife near his eye. Even then, Banks shouted at Rambo not to give in. But Rambo, unable to watch his friend suffer, agreed to Podovsky's demands and was placed in front of a radio mic. When he began speaking in English, Kobau recognized his voice and ran toward the hut. At the US base, both Murdoch and Troutman heard Rambo's voice over the speaker. When the American soldier asked Rambo about his situation, Rambo replied he would only speak to Murdoch. Then, he attacked the guards using the mic stand. At the same time, Kobau opened fire from outside. Inside, Rambo used the torture machine to severely injure Yush, retrieved his knife, smashed a window, and escaped. With Kobao's help, they fought their way out, gunning down every enemy in their path. When they reached a barbed wire fence, Rambo helped Kobao cross first, and then they both fled into the jungle. Trucks and helicopters were sent to find them, but Rambo used his survival skills to stay ahead. The next morning, Kobao treated his wounds, and Rambo thanked her for not abandoning him in such tough times. He decided to cross the border through Thailand and return to America. Kobao asked to come with him, and they shared a kiss. But before they could continue, enemy soldiers ambushed them and fatally shot Kobao. Enraged, Rambo retaliated, but one enemy escaped. Though he tried to save her, Kobao died in his arms. At the US base, Trautmann again demanded a rescue mission, but Murdoch refused. Trautmann threatened to expose him, so Murdoch had him arrested. In the jungle, Rambo wore Kobao's pendant around his neck and buried her under the trees. The mission was no longer just about rescuing prisoners. It had become his personal war. The Vietnamese and Soviet forces searched for him, but Rambo vanished like a ghost. Camouflaged in mud, he began silently eliminating soldiers one by one using only his knife and bow. He set traps and ambushes, wiping out entire squads. Eventually, he tracked down the man who killed Kobao and blew him apart with a single arrow. Just then, a helicopter carrying Yush attacked Rambo with a bomb, but he escaped by diving into the river. As the Soviets lowered the chopper to fire into the water, Rambo suddenly burst out, climbed aboard, and engaged Yush in a brutal fight in the cockpit. As the chopper lost balance, Yush tried to strangle him, but Rambo overpowered him and threw him out. He then took control of the helicopter and flew to the POW camp, bombing huts and armories. Once he landed, he ruthlessly eliminated the enemy soldiers and freed his comrades. Though they began to flee, the battle wasn't over. Podolsky arrived in an armed helicopter and launched a fierce attack. Rambo struggled to control the chopper to avoid crashing in a nearby village. With the damage too great to fly further, he landed in a nearby pond. Podolsky cautiously approached, thinking Rambo was unconscious inside. Just as he prepared to finish him, Rambo sprang up and fired a rocket launcher straight at him. Podolsky's helicopter exploded into a fireball and was completely destroyed. Rambo then turned his own helicopter back toward the base and radioed for support from the US forces. As soon as Murdoch heard his voice in the command center, he panicked and ran away. Meanwhile, Trautmann ordered his men to prepare to treat the wounded. Within moments, Rambo landed the helicopter, grabbed his M60 machine gun, and stormed forward. On his way, he passed Erickson and Trautmann, but neither stopped him. Rambo entered the operations room and unleashed a hail of bullets, destroying computers and control panels. Then he went straight to Murdoch's office. Seeing him, Murdoch was terrified and stammered that he was only following government orders. Rambo slammed him onto the desk and pulled out his knife. But just before delivering the fatal blow, his hands trembled, not out of fear, but because he realized that killing Murdoch wouldn't change what had happened. Looking into his eyes, Rambo told him that American soldiers were still rotting in foreign prisons, and it was his duty to bring them home. He didn't want Murdoch's apology. He wanted action to bring those soldiers back. Meanwhile, doctors treated the rescued soldiers from Vietnam. Troutman then asked Rambo what he would do next, suggesting the government might award him a medal. But Rambo replied that he didn't deserve any medals. The true heroes were those soldiers who endured years of torture. He declared he wouldn't return to America, but would stay in Asia. Though Troutman asked him to come back, Rambo walked away, knowing there was nothing left for him in America. When his comrades died in Vietnam, a part of him died too. When asked if he hated his country, Rambo said he still loved it and would die for it. But this path only led one way, filled with pain and nothing else. With that, Rambo walked off into the distance.